你们做了什么？你们做了什么？你们5个只是看了800个病，还他妈1天4个班，还把我们除了8个门诊是3班，我们不想活。于是你看。
Coronavirus continues its exponential spread across China. This despite Chinese state propaganda peddling a line of measures taken, especially earlier in the month, having limited the spread of the virus that is not being borne out by data released that on a daily basis shows the spread is exponential to across the whole of China and likely neighbouring nations. My analysis and concluding forecast of 28th January, based on data up until the 27th of January, utilised trend analysis to forecast that the coronavirus could infect over 1 million people by the end of February 2020, which, given the apparent fatality rate of 3.5% at that time, converted into a death toll of at least 35,000. Which, if it transpired, would be far worse than the 2002 to 2003 SARS pandemic that infected 8,098 over 8 months, resulting in 774 deaths, and thus the coronavirus would have a significant economic and market consequences. As the graph illustrates, the trend trajectory forecast infections to only start really taking off globally mid-February, when the number of infections are expected to exceed 100,000 and deaths 2,500. So we are still some 12 days away from when the coronavirus pandemic really starts to take off, which means the world has a short window of opportunity to act to limit the spread of the virus. Unfortunately, the world's governments are doing the exact opposite, where even at this stage of actively flying home potentially infected nationals, with a flight of some 200 British nationals being brought to the UK tomorrow. No matter what the government states, the British government, just like the Chinese government before it, will not be able to contain infections from such flights, as it only takes one person to start an epidemic in the UK. Instead, it would have been far better to isolate suspected infections rather than to transport to infection-free areas. Thus, I'm afraid the actions of most governments will contribute to the spread of the virus, and thus the forecast trend trajectory remains very highly probable. The world map illustrates the spread of the virus as of today, the 30th of January 2020, where infections now total 7,700. So, is the virus spreading faster than forecast or not? The forecast for the number of infections and deaths by the 30th of January 2020 versus actual are 6,041 forecast against 7,700 actual, so 20% more than forecast. Whilst deaths, 211 were forecast and actual are 170, so 80% of forecast. Were this trend to continue into the end of February 2020, then the number of infected would increase to 1.27 million, whilst the number of deaths would fall to 28,000. So the latest data implies a wider spread but a lower mortality rate. However, these are still the very early days of the spread of the coronavirus, especially given that there are large susceptible population groups with poor healthcare infrastructure, such as India, that announced its first infection today. Also, that a vaccine is still a good 4 months away, far too late to have any impact on this pandemic. Meanwhile, this is what China and Asia's current infection map currently looks like, a harbinger of what to expect when the virus travels to uninfected populations. Contrary to all of the measures taken by the Chinese to limit its spread, the virus is now spread to the whole of China, which means it cannot be contained, and it's only a matter of time before it goes global at roughly the same rate of spread. And my latest market analysis is on the silver price trend that concludes in a detailed trend forecast for 2020, which has first been made available to patrons who support my work. So for immediate first access to all of my analysis and trend forecasts, then do consider becoming a patron by supporting my work for just $3 per month. And you will also gain access to my recent analysis that includes the gold price trend forecast for 2020, British pound trend forecast for 2020, AI stocks 2019 review and buying levels for Q1 2020, and a general stock market trend forecast outlook for 2020, as well as the following scheduled analysis to follow over the next few weeks. And ensure you subscribe to this YouTube channel for the next video in this series and for detailed trend forecast videos.